Hey everyone, and thank you so much for checking out my Monopoly collection. This is the full collection of all the Monopoly extension resources I have created. The idea is that you have the original board game Monopoly, and that these are add-ons to it that will help enhance what you're doing in your classroom, particularly when it comes to teaching students about personal finance. We want our content to be exciting, engaging, and educational. And sometimes that's a struggle. And I find Monopoly is one of the best mediums for getting students excited about what they're learning and to introduce new topics, to practice different ideas that they come across in your curriculum, or to help them discover new ideas that you can then talk about in your curriculum. There's a lot of applications, and these are 12 resources that can really help you, do that in your classroom. I want to take you through them really quick. So the first one is we have a cash flow tracker net worth calculator. This is where I typically will start, getting students used to keeping track of all income and expenses during a game. At the end, then they can actually calculate their net worth. And then we kind of come back to this a lot when we play Monopoly in the future. So that net worth calculation and even just tracking cash flow, one of the most important skills we learn. Second one is insurance Monopoly. Now this would come in your insurance unit, obviously, but a great way to get students used to the idea of figuring out a policy, determining what they want to add on or have excluded, their coverage limits, and so on. And then when they play, it helps cover them against the major negative events that could financially ruin you in a game. So, things like landing on a big hotel or building repairs or whatever it is, the insurance policy could potentially cover that. So a great way to practice insurance. Next up, we have Cashless Monopoly. This is for simulating online banking or digital transactions. So getting students used to the idea of transacting without cash and maybe noticing how much they spend in comparison to when they play with cash. It's also a great way to simulate blockchain technology. So every student tracks all the transactions of every player on the board, and they are constant agreement about who has how much money in the same way that the blockchain ledger works for something like, say, Bitcoin. All right, then we have income tax Monopoly. Taxes, really hard topic to teach, especially to get students excited about it. And trying to find an opportunity for them to practice filing taxes is not the easiest thing. So let's play Monopoly. Let's generate profit and let's tax our profits using a flat tax and a progressive tax system. So I have options for both. Monopoly Asset Tracker. How did I do? Like, which of my properties was my best performing property? So this has students actually keep track of how many times a player lands on their property, how much the property cost them overall, and then how much money they made from it, just to try and figure out what a return on investment might look like. All right, the check writing Monopoly, as you would guess, we are practicing writing checks here. So this can go in your banking unit, and we take the cash away. We give students a bunch of blank checks instead, and they write checks to each other for any expense that pops up. And they also maintain a check ledger. So just like you would do in your own checkbook. And this helps keep track of who has how much money, and students get a ton of practice writing checks. And it's not just kind of the boring examples we normally see in a textbook. It's something that they have to do in order to play the game. So it feels a little bit easier and a little bit more natural. All right, credit Monopoly, we are borrowing our starting amount of money instead of just having it or part of it. And the student is then going to have an interest rate. They're going to have to make payments on this debt throughout the game until the debt is paid off. And students get to practice managing that debt. So you can play this multiple times, and each time ask students to come up with a different strategy. Next up, we have the expected return on investment for a property. So this starts with the question of which is the best property to own in Monopoly. So we pose that question to students. We ask them to think about, what property is going to offer the best return for the cost that has to go into it. Is it based on location? Is it based on how much it costs to acquire it or to develop it? And we go through the process then of trying to figure out, well, what is the ROI of a property when you own a single one, when you own the color set, when you develop it with houses and hotels, or if you own all the utilities or all the railroads. And we try to actually answer that question, which property is the best property. All right, this one is a kind of an add-on resource. It's a pause game card. So if you are playing the game Monopoly and you maybe have a shorter class period, or you want to continue the game the next day, each student fills out one of these. It records everything about the game that is important for that student, so that when you pull the game out tomorrow and pull out all the pieces again, you can quickly get back to where you were and continue play. And everything's recorded. There's no debate about who has what or where someone was or whose turn it was. It's a nice way to just kind of make sure that things transition smoothly. All right, strategy and reflection. What are you going to do before you start playing? So it has a bunch of questions to kind of prompt students to think about what their goals are, what their strategies are going to be, how are they going to assess the risk when they play, and then to try and implement that during the game. And then after the game, fill out the post-game reflection where we're thinking about what did happen, how did the actual events of the game influence your thinking, did anything pop up that was unexpected, how did you react to that, how did the other players impact you, and so on. So just a way to kind of put a nice bow on the game and get students making those connections to the real world. So if they aren't thinking about it naturally, this helps bring those connections to the light. All right, financial literacy Monopoly is a really fun one, actually. You get a bunch of financial knowledge cards. I think I have 72 in this resource. And every time a transaction happens, so say I land on someone's property and I owe them rent, I pull one of these financial knowledge cards. If I get it right, the amount of rent I owe to that player is reduced. If I get it wrong, the rent actually increases. Same thing for buying properties or paying taxes, fees. It applies to every transaction, with the overarching idea being that if you are financially literate, things will cost you less because you're going to know a little bit more about what you're doing. And if you're not financially literate, they're going to cost you more because you're going to make mistakes or not do the research, that sort of thing. It's a great way to practice your kind of lower level foundation knowledge for personal finance, or to introduce topics at the beginning of a course so that when you come across them later in the curriculum, students are like, oh yeah, I have heard of that before. I do want to know more about that. So this can be played throughout your curriculum as a introduction or review game. All right, final thing I have is my set of class rules. So if you're going to play Monopoly in your classroom, you probably don't want to play the full traditional rules because those games take hours and you're playing until someone has a complete Monopoly and bankrupts all the other players. In a classroom, that would be a lot of people sitting around, either waiting for other players to go bankrupt or just a long period of time to be on the game. So I've developed a set of class rules, kind of like house rules, that just speed the game up and allow you to complete in one single class period of about like 60 to 80 minutes. Obviously, if you want to continue it, you've got things like the pause game card as well. But this is a printable class poster that has the rules on it, and then you can also use it as a handout. You can project on your screen during game. There's a bunch of uses for it. Okay, that is all of the resources in this full Monopoly collection. If you have any questions, please send me an email, thefieducator@gmail.com. And thanks so much for checking out.